All right. So we are here with Mr. Tim Rodgers. He's known as the president here at 49 Financial because his overall demeanor and good looks. Tim, I always like to start things out with a little bit of fun. So you once told me the number one goal you and your wife had in just more of the hobby fun world is Michelin star restaurants. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. So Michelin star restaurants, it's more of a travel goal. I started with pretty young wanting to do the what is it, the seven wonders, right?
Okay.
And
Yep.
then
Can you list the seven wonders? Let's test you here.
I
Can
I
you list
can't.
them?
Don't even.
Okay.
I
No.
probably
Machu
I
Picchu is one of
probably
them.
could get three. Machu Picchu is one of them. And I think honestly, we just kind of we wanted to have more of a broader travel goal. So we looked it up, and there's uh, over 4,000 Michelin restaurants. So
Is
that's a
that right?
little unachievable. But there's only 148 3-star. So 12 in the
Okay.
U.S. So it kind of forces us to do some travel. So it's been a fun thing. We are four down out of the 148, and so
Come
we got a
on.
lot of work to do. But
I love it. I love it. And you and Stephanie, happily married for years now. You've got an awesome son, Maverick. That just for listeners out there, I'm not sure he likes me much. I did everything I could to get fist bumps, to do all I could. I got to work on my game with these kids. But then what? In the next week, I know this is going to be listened to, but we're sitting here, in March of 2025. We're a week away from baby number two, right?
week away from baby number two, we will be celebrating Reese, baby girl, coming into the world next
Come on.
Saturday. And yeah, Travis, I think the Maverick thing, it must be the baldness. There's not a lot of that in our family, and so, but we'll get him used to it. But yeah, Stephanie and I, we actually just celebrated this past week 7 years, and so
Awesome.
it'll be really fun to have a daughter this close to yeah, our anniversary. So.
That's awesome. Well, listen, running a sorority myself, that is one thing I can give some thoughts on. These little girls are amazing, but will be so fun to see. Let's be honest, life's messy. Decisions are complex, and it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to the tension. Let's get into it. Well, listen, this podcast is all about the tensions that face us in life,
Sure.
right? It's the things that we're making decisions on that are very, very difficult. It's not black and white. It's not right and wrong. It's literally a tension. And I think that one of the things that we want to talk with you about is this tension that exists between risk and reward. Every day, we are all making decisions, likely subconsciously, even more than consciously, around what's going to shape the rest of our life. And at the
Mm.
center of a lot of those decisions is this idea that we've all heard of: greater risk equals greater reward. And so we thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we can't wait to learn
Mhm.
from you on this specific tension that we're tackling today. Anything to say on the front end?
Yeah, I love this topic. It's one of my favorite. Our pastor shares this quote often. It's actually a quote from one of my favorite pastors, Francis Chan. But the
Mm,
quote is, "Our greatest fear in life should not be failure, but it's succeeding at things in life that don't matter." So our
come
greatest fear in
on.
life should not be failure, but it's succeeding at things in life that don't matter. And so how that's really, there's so many ways I could share some background on, even how risk and reward has, manifested in my life. But I think about that quote is very convicting, sometimes haunting, when I found myself getting a little
Yeah.
comfy of so
Yeah.
many of the reasons why we don't choose to do things. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. Well, you actually hit on it. I think the framework that we want to take anytime we're introducing a new tension, right, risk and reward, is this idea of what is it? Why does it matter? And then how can we all apply some practical tips from our guests that are doing it well? And Tim, just to commend you, I have seen you take this idea of risk and reward, and you're as good as almost anyone I have met in applying that to the way in which you do your decision framework, both personally and professionally. And so I can't wait to learn from you. I'm sure our listeners can't wait to learn as well. But let's start with the beginning. So you just gave a really good definition, and I love Francis Chan, wonderful books that have shaped me. He has written. But this idea of, okay, so could you more practically tell us, and let's go, you can go personal, you can go business, like
Sure.
risk versus reward. That's the definition from someone else. But what's Tim's definition? Like, what is this risk versus reward? What is the tension?
I'll take a pretty far step back for just how I think about risk. It is something that I think was really modeled and ingrained for me actually in my parents just growing up. And just to take a step back, I many of the people around us, Travis, I'm adopted, and
Yeah, yeah,
so part of that story, it's such a beautiful story. And there was as I've grown through life, and I've reflected on what the risks that my parents who adopted me stepped into.
yeah.
It's so convicting into just how I think about most things. And just to give a little insight, we don't have to go through all the details, but I my biological father was not in the picture. My biological mother had some pretty severe mental health issues, and so that resulted in
Mm,
me getting CPS called twice, to the point to where, from just bystanders finding me without
yeah.
supervision. So it would have landed me in the state of Missouri foster care system. And
Mm,
so right around that time, my parents, they were brand newly married. My parents now, 2 years into marriage, a lot of uncertainty in their life. They were overseas missionaries struggling with finances, and they had kind of there's all the uncertainty as I've looked back and heard more about their story for them on where they wanted to take their family. And the neat part of it is I was adopted within my family, so my mom now is actually was formerly my second cousin. And so this opportunity came up to not have me go into foster care, and they stepped into that.
yeah,
And I think about them and all of the things that could have, saying yes to something and saying no to something else. So the
right.
risks that they accepted saying yes to, and all the things that came after that,
Mhm.
that they were willing to do, and it can obviously has completely changed the trajectory of my life and the way that I make decisions of, something in front of me. Is this a decision I'm making that is for my own comfort, or for where I feel like, ultimately the Lord's leading and opportunities are leading? And
Yeah,
stepping
yeah.
in through the door of risk leads to, yeah, who knows what rewards on the other side. And when those rewards become less about you and more about what is for other people, I think those are
Yeah.
worthwhile risks to take. So,
Yeah. Boy, Tim, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, obviously I knew your story, but for folks listening, it's so powerful. So let's stay here on the personal side before we go to the business side, because I'll
sure.
be interested to unpack that with you. But talk to me in a minute. I hear two things there, right? Like the first side of it is being adopted, and what your adopted parents had to go through as far as this idea of risk and reward, and then being missionaries on top of that. I mean, you really do, come from an upbringing of maybe understanding risk reward. How do you think that, that shaped you, that as you grow up and get more and more into adulthood and, have kids of your own, like you're probably noticing you're different than others. Like, how do you see it being different, having such awesome role models that have really shown you what risk versus reward looks like?
So this was put into context. Oftentimes, when you're growing up, you don't really know necessarily what's going on. People oftentimes will ask me,
Right.
"What's it like being adopted?" It's the only thing I know. I was too young to understand. So you connect the dots. You never can connect dots looking forward. You can always connect dots looking backwards. And I
Yeah.
read a
Yeah.
book actually from another pastor, Tim Keller. It's a book on work, but it helped frame up a lot more just thinking in life. It's called Every Good Endeavor, and
Hmm.
when decisions, whether it's work, whether it's marriage, whether it's faith or parenting, you name it, community, when decisions become less about you and they become more about, man, what are your unique gifts, opportunities, skill sets, things you're stirred by to step
Yeah.
into things that don't necessarily serve you but serve others around you, man, those are great things to pursue. I just mentioned that, and I think seeing that, looking backwards of what my parents did, it's really forced this. As as I've gotten older, you're faced with more bigger decisions as you step into life decisions like
Yeah.
marriage and parenting and work and business. And it's given that example, looking backwards, frameworks that I've learned over the years, that help me make decisions to, okay, is this a Tim decision, or is this all of these things around me that have been placed in front of me that are worthwhile to pursue? So that's it's almost it feels out of character because of what my parents did, to, or it feels it's sometimes almost maybe like a slap in the face to not
Yeah.
step into what is what is, the opportunities that can seem risky, but lead to rewards. Again, not for myself, but for others around me.
Yeah.
So,
Man, that is so good, and hearing that, it seems like the decisions they made, whether it's adopting you or whether for mission work, what it seems like is they defined their reward well. And so therefore the risk was worth it, right? Like completely altering your
mhm,
life. And then now, you have this beautiful wife and now these kids and all these things. Like your life is forever different. And they have the reward of seeing that. And then as a missionary, right, such conviction they have, right, about their faith and wanting others to know that faith. And so, yeah, I think that's just a really good point for us all to take of when the reward is about love and the
mm,
reward is about others
it's
and
great.
it's to see those things happen. Boy, it sure does make the risk look really tiny. And it
Yeah.
seems like what you're telling us is, the more that you focus on yourself and the reward for yourself, the risk seems to be bigger because it's all just for you. And that's not
Mm.
what we're made to do. Would you say that's a fair takeaway?
It's a super fair takeaway. I think you put it in excellent words. Is and honestly, the more that you gain that perspective, it never gets easier, right? You're always faced with the same challenges, but
Totally.
when you have that perspective, it's actually some of the most freeing ways to make decisions when it becomes less about you and more about, yeah, what
Come
what
on.
what are your unique gifts, skill sets, opportunities that you've been blessed with. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good. Thanks for going there. And so let's switch over to the personal, from personal to professional. So I know your past, you were awesome in Arkansas, right? You did great there. And then you come out of school, you do JC Penney
Mhm.
in more of a corporate role. And then you flip over and you do 49 Financial, which just looking at the two jobs, right? One would say one is pretty much what you're going to be for the next 30 or 40 years, and then the other one is
Sure.
you kind of make it whatever you want it to be. Like walk us through on the professional side, like why did you when you were 22 or whatever it was make the decision for JC Penney? Then what made you kind of realize maybe the risk reward tension decision that you had to make, that you wanted to switch that decision and then do something like this?
Great question. So I'll kind of start with, you mentioned it, what led to starting in the corporate world, and then I'll be really honest, Travis. I probably I had this itch to do something more like what I do now in the business setting of financial planning and getting to do it with a great team. And I could not at the time reconcile, one, I couldn't find anyone to do it with.
Yeah.
It felt very individualistic, do your own thing. And I was ready to work really hard. I still just wanted to be mentored. And I just never could connect those dots. And so that's really what led. I had a lot of angst of I wanted to do something in this field and just didn't have the confidence through the team to take the step. And so did more
Sure.
of the corporate
Sure.
thing. I was excited about it. Jumped in. Nothing was wrong. The career was going great. Loved the team. The culture was great. Compensation was good, those sorts of things. And I just kind of got hit with, I think, two things. One, missing the impact to what I was doing daily. And then secondarily, there was a practical, man, if I'm going to be working, I really want to be able to drive my opportunity, income, those sorts
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I hear this, I want to work with people, and I want to find a job where I want to work with people. Get any job. There's not a job you're not going to work with people. But
a,
I
a good point.
so, but I think what I was internally missing was that impact, and if I could connect it to getting to drive personally, I mean that would be electric. And it was around that time, 49 was in Austin. They were looking to expand. I met Kyle Sims, and it just made so much sense from a mentorship standpoint. And I was faced with, I go back to that book, Every Good Endeavor.
Yeah.
Every question as I went through that process to go from what seemed like certainty and security to uncertainty, but I wanted to do it more.
Yeah.
Every objection I ended up having, go back to when it's not about me, it had to do with Tim. It had to do
Come
with,
on.
man, maybe I wouldn't do it because I might not make enough money. What if I don't get clients? What if what if I have to go back to corporate and I look like a failure? What if all these things? And those were a lot more Tim based, and whether it's identity or security or comfort versus, I do have this itch to do it. I have a conviction to do it. I'm really excited about doing it. It seems like the time frame is right. I got mentors around me. And
Yeah.
so operating not based on what ifs, but what do you know?
Yeah.
Um, I think that that's what ultimately led me to do it. I'll also say, at the time I was in a city I wasn't from, and I had actually just proposed when the opportunity was
Okay.
present. So
A
there was an
perfect
added
time to start
uh,
an all commission job, by the way. Just perfect.
yeah, that's exactly right. New city, bigger city, and new marriage, and so there was all those questions as well. And again, it came back to there's so many what ifs, but you can't operate in the what ifs. You got to operate in what do you know, and there was enough
Yeah.
known of what mattered around that caused the step into it. So
So good. A couple things there. I was coached on this when I was going through something really difficult some years ago, that the worst place for a human being to find themselves in is when they're living in the negative hypotheticals.
hmm
And I think that, it's such an interesting thing, right? Like, we sit around as human beings and we go to these places of what will this turn out to be? What will this be? What will that be? And if we just stop for a second and say, is that outcome negative or is that outcome positive? I think, to your point, like, most of the time when we're doing it for ourselves, it's about self-protection. It's about,
yep,
approval. It's about how will I be seen and what will happen of me. And therefore it's negative hypotheticals that get played out. But it's
sure,
almost like what you were saying 10 minutes ago, like this idea of, if you're taking a risk but the reward is for others, well, now you're thinking, well, I'll adopt him because I see the positive hypothetical that his life could change forever. And you're playing out that
yep,
hypothetical in a positive lens, which I just think is so, so powerful to this idea that risk versus reward in a selfish context is scary. And we don't have any answers out there. But risk
mm,
versus reward for others is about the most simple decision there is. So let's keep going in your story. So you make that switch.
hmm
Obviously it was different, right? So clearly, like, you're talking about the impact and all those types of things, but different job, right? At JC Penney, I
hmm
assume, they're giving you, different tasks and assignments. And as long as you do that, you're going to make your raise and do that, versus a go kind of grow what you want to grow. Any day, anything can happen. Like, talk to us about
yeah.
some of the biggest things you feel like, even in that first year. I know you're super successful, and we're going to get there in a second, of kind of some of the rewards you've gotten from taking, quote unquote, more risk. But, like, talk to us about lessons that first year when you went from a seemingly low risk, low reward to a high risk, high reward type setting.
Yeah, I that's a great question. The initial point that comes to mind is you're conditioned for all throughout school to prepare, and then execute, right? Prepare, execute, study, take the exam. And for
Yeah.
most people, you can know what your outcome is and then back into what you need to do to get to that outcome. And the biggest fundamental shift I know that was a challenge for me, and is as I've observed just through leadership challenges for others, is this is very flipped on its head, where the only way to learn is to just try without all the
Mm.
answers. And so you
Come on.
actually have to execute. And through that execution, you gain learning, you gain knowledge, you gain conviction, and you actually get the outcome of what we get to do, which is serve people every day. Why I think that's so powerful. What we get to do in entrepreneurship is you're not doing it alone. You get to do it
Yeah.
together. And there's people right alongside you that are endeavoring in that with you, while you're building all of the acumen that you need to be successful. So that would be the biggest challenge, is realizing that, hey, you have to take a step forward without all the answers, which is so contradictory to how most people, young people, live their life. Is you
Yeah.
want to know all the answers before you make a decision. So that was probably my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And once you got that, though, I would say on the flip side of it, you realize, oh my gosh, so many people that are very, very successful, they don't have all the answers. They're making the best
Mm,
decisions with what they got, with wise
that's
counsel
right.
and experience behind them. And once you kind of sit in that seat and you taste the fruits of it, it opens a whole new door for your life of what's possible
Yeah.
when you continue to do that. So
So Tim, I mean, unbelievable. I love the idea of, you can't be obsessive with the outcomes when you have no idea what those may be. You have to be obsessed with the
Hmm.
process and like, what are you doing every day to make it happen? Which, like, you said, I mean, in JCPenney, they kind of told you what the outcome is and what you needed to do, and then you just do it, right? And so I can see why that's far less stressful of a position, especially out of school, because you don't have to learn an extra lesson. And anytime we're learning, there's growing
Hmm.
pains. And those growing pains reveal a lot about us. And so, but give me like, you say all this now, and again, super successful, but like I remember, when you'd started and everything, like was there a moment, was there a conversation that you had with someone, was there a podcast, was there a book, like when did you just say, you know what, this is how I'm going to do this, I'm going to just do the right things every day, walk out in a level of faith and trust, right? Like, because you had to have made that decision sometime, right? Like, do you have like a vivid
Hmm.
memory?
I think there's different phases. We even talk about it internally of just phases of your progression within the business. And we talk a lot. You never know exactly what you're doing until you jump into it. And so there was certainly
Yeah.
decisions and commitments on the front end. And
Right.
ultimately, I have a vivid memory of, I call it what I would say is a brink of destruction moment. Which
Yeah.
is so silly of what actually happened. Now looking back, I would call it that's just a normal Tuesday,
Yeah. Yeah.
for someone that's been doing this for a while. But I would just remember there was a day of like it just felt like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
Hour by hour, it just went wrong. And I remember, so we're 2.5 months into marriage, or maybe a month and a half into marriage. I go back to our apartment, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. My wife's a teacher, so she's actually not doing anything in the summer. She's just there,
Yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
break down.
Mm.
And I remember that moment so vividly. It's funny because we joke about it now. Um, the the I asked her because I was sharing the story with the team one day, and I asked her what happened afterwards. Like, did we just go to dinner, or like what happened? She's like,
Right.
I think we just went to dinner, and then we just kept going. You keep
Yeah.
going. And I remember that moment because I remember feeling as though, man, I'm never gonna let that. I don't want to feel like that again. I'm never gonna let that
Yeah.
feel like that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it starts to change. Okay, there are a lot of things. You go back to inputs, outputs in any role, whether it's entrepreneurial or some corporate role. Inputs do lead to outputs, and you just don't know exactly what those outcomes are going to be until you do enough inputs.
Yeah.
And I think here that that was the moment for me. That was, I'm going to focus on not putting any of my identity or what's going on or success in the outcomes. I'm just going to focus on the inputs. And then
Yeah.
at that point, stuff really starts to hum and work itself out.
Yeah. But what's interesting in hearing your story that I've actually not thought of until hearing that is one of the great joys of the whole risk reward kind of decision framework, right, and tension that we're constantly living in. I think you got a reward, it sounds like, with your wife that day, that had you not taken something
Hmm.
risky, had you not tried something hard, you kind of would never have had a moment of, I broke down in front of my wife, very, very young into the marriage, and she was there for me. Right. And that's kind of this like milestone, my guess is, as you guys continue on and even in your parenting, you probably get to look back on, right?
Totally. Yeah. And just shout out to her, Stephanie. She's wonderful. There's so much I would not have been able to do without her support and belief in what we're building. And again, all of the microcosms of sacrifice she has
Yeah.
to make this
Yeah.
possible. But I think the what we want to be known by and what we want our kids to be known by is, hey, mom and dad step into challenges that we believe are not just right for us, but right for where the Lord's leading our family.
Yeah.
And by doing those, we are becoming the people that we say we want to be as
Yeah.
a family. And that was a moment, not just in the business, but in our marriage, absolutely, that set that
Yeah.
trajectory of who we wanted to be known by.
Yeah, and I'm curious to keep on that because you're mentioning something that in risk reward, that once you have a spouse, and I know people listening may or may not, maybe dating, whatever it is, but when you take on risk, you're naturally bringing them in on that journey. The highs, lows, all
Mhm.
those types of things. Do you have advice? Of you're at J.C. Penney, and you kind of just, again, being told what to do, and that's just a lot easier, and you can clock out at 5 o'clock and kind of move on, and there's good to that if that's what someone's journey is. But you're choosing to, like, I don't know what it's going to be, to the point where you're kind of breaking down in a year and a half. Like, talk to us about were there things that you learned when on your own risk journey that then she went on with you, right? Things that you learned of like conversations you wish you would have had earlier that you're having now as far as like expectations. Like how do you bring someone along the journey with you? Maybe is the question.
Man, what I feel like that could be its own hour and a half in of itself. And I'm certainly not an expert at it. A lot of anything I've typically learned in that typically comes out of a past season of failure or conversation
Yeah.
we had because of it. And so I would tell you the when I think about just the leadership and inviting Steph into what we're doing, it all goes back to the why. I've learned connecting it to all the results of things, and for her, she's so sweet. None of the money matters. None of that
Mm,
really
mm.
matters
Her
to
reward
her.
may be different than your reward, right? They could be different definitions.
Very, very definite, very significant, different definitions. It might help, right? It might lead to more flexibility, or things
Right.
like that. But it's going back to not only my why, and I'm so blessed why it matters for me. And just to say this about Steph, she really cares about me being very fulfilled in what I do.
Yeah.
And that was at the beginning of our marriage, and that's obviously evolved as I've grown in leadership and the organization's grown and we've grown in our marriage.
Yeah.
But then connecting that to, well, this isn't just the Tim Rodgers show. This is
Come on.
the Steph and Tim. And why do we do what we're doing? Why do we step into risk? And I think really aligning on that first.
Yeah.
Whenever you have a strong defined why, you can always figure out the what and the how. And
Yes.
that's not even practical when you're taking risky decisions within business, but when you're inviting as a partnership,
Yeah.
really the partnership aligning on the why as well, is why it matters to your family. That is of utmost importance. That'd be my number one piece of advice for young people starting to think if stepping into something like this or any risky endeavor is the people that matter most. And if you have leadership responsibility of anyone in a marriage or as a parent, starting with the why is always going to be the number one first step.
It's so good. I think that having done something that would be perceived high risk myself, kind of doing a job like this and growing a company and all of that, Jacqueline and I, we realized that when we were at our worst was whenever we never actually were able to say, here is together our reward. And so I'm
Hmm.
taking risk and I'm coming home like, do you understand? Like, I'm working so hard and all these types of things without ever mutually defining the reward. Because if I'm just falling back on it goes back to your first comment. This is what Travis wants. This is what Travis's reward is. That's not inspiring to her. We're supposed to be a married
Hmm.
couple that is Jacqueline and Travis. And so I think that yeah, if you're listening out there and you're either you're married and this is just kind of hitting you, or you're wanting that to be on your journey and your life story. I think what Tim is saying here, I just can't stress enough of define the why together because it changes
Yeah,
from when you were single. I mean, that's God, that is so good. I wish I had a few years before when I really figured that out because it creates a real tough environment if you don't get that clarity.
absolutely. It's great advice.
So, Tim, you're kind of easy to talk to here. I mean, we did the what, we did the why, and we've gotten to the how. So we're knocking everything out. But I do want to go to, we've gotten your personal story, we've gotten your professional story. I want to say one more thing on the professional side, and then I'd like to just take it to just, a little bit more on the how of just, how you're
Sure.
seeing this idea of risk reward, what you've seen in other people, advice you'd give. But as you think about structurally, for you, and you can share as much
Hmm.
as you want to or not, you were on a path that you knew I do X, Y, Z, and I make X, and that was J.C. Penney.
Hmm.
Then you came here and you built something. And I know, right now where you are from an age perspective and life perspective, you are financially doing better than almost anyone probably and almost any, anyone knows. And that's a really special thing. Would you tell us, like, before we get into practical tips, I want the audience to make sure that they understand, and you're such a humble guy, I'm going to try to pull this out of you, how successful you really are. But like, can you give us whatever range you want to, even if it's I'm at this X, what I would be making at JCPenney or something to the effect of like, from an income perspective, you're doing much better. And then maybe if you could give us something, you said like the big difference there was the reward would be impactful, right? And you can use the
Yeah.
money for your family and all that stuff, but impact is there. Like, give us a little bit of like, now being in it for a bit, you're feeling the rewards. What are some of those things you're feeling?
Well, it's a good question, and I'll share a funny story. So I prior to this, and still now, I was a big spreadsheet guy. I had all these plans and all of these
Shocker,
like
everybody. This is not a
yeah,
shocker to me.
yeah. I'm not gonna, and I made this decision in my mind. I'm not actually gonna step into this career until X point because that was the perfect time that all of these like, but what was going to be in my 401k, what was going to be in my savings, and all these things was going to
Right.
give me the confidence to step out in this. And so that was one thing that was in my mind. The second thing that was in my mind, man, I had a absurd fear. And I say it's absurd now, but it was a real fear then. So I don't want to minimize anyone's experience. But I was so scared of saying no to the salary and
Mm,
losing. I knew I could figure it out for a year in the business,
yeah.
but I was so scared of having to go back to corporate and not getting the merit increase of the
Oh,
3%,
wow.
5% of whatever it was. That was like crystallized in my mind of
Okay.
that's one of my biggest hurdles is what if I have to go back to corporate and I missed out on 1 year of merit. And I think of that now because it's just so funny because I never would have dreamed, but I don't think I've actually made less than that salary in a month for the past of what that salary was in the past 3 years, which
Come
is
on.
is
That's
even
a humbling
why.
thing to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned that to my wife the other night because she remembers that conversation of like what that amount was, and it's crazy to think that that could have again go back to that was a security comfort decision of why not to do it back in
Yeah.
2018,
Yep.
and moving past you don't even know what is possible. You open doors that you don't even couldn't even fathom would be a reality. And so I kind of give you a progression of my life in the business because it became of oh my gosh, what is possible. And I'm just a very go back to my core. It is if there's an opportunity in front of me and it fits where I feel like the Lord's leading. It fits where I can take it. So why wouldn't I? It's so hard for me to say no to getting to maximize and getting to just be
Yeah.
excellent with what I was doing. And so I'm actually in an interesting season now to where when you catch what's possible in this business, it's so easy, as you know, Travis, to just go crazy with it, and it just
Right.
becomes electric.
Yeah.
And now as we're expecting our second and all that, you start fine tuning. Okay, what do you actually care about? Is it more of
Yeah.
the financial opportunities or more of what that flexibility even provides? And so finding that balance, it's never perfect. It's a both
Yeah.
and all the time. And so that's been probably more of the past year and a half, navigating, okay, how does that all work? Yes, we could do more. And yes, sometimes now time actually it's starting to be way more invaluable
Yeah.
practically than what an extra, however much that is in income. And then going back to the impact standpoint, I'd connect it to two things. I never would have thought some of the conversations I get to be a part of with people that are twice my age, have so much wisdom, have had impactful careers and family lives that we get to be in some of the deepest conversations with, and being a part of those and guiding those. I feel so blessed as it that just turns into a wealth of wisdom that I get to be a part of that a lot of other
Yeah.
people don't get to experience. The second part of my role that I feel very blessed by is, man, the first time you get to serve someone and call them a client that you work with, but then the first time that you get to lead someone else to do that or see that happen in like Kansas City of someone
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know and will never know, but I get to see through others that this impact is happening. That's something that is such a blessing that we never would have thought you could be a part of, especially when
Yeah.
I go back to making that decision to leave JCPenney back in 2018. It's just feel very, very blessed with where it's gone.
Yeah. Well, and I think it just goes to show, I think about JCPenney. I mean, I was at a big consulting firm before doing this. And it's like I knew I could do the spreadsheet, I could do the analytics, I could do the work they asked me to do. But if you ask me what's the reward on the end of that, I think the only thing I really could have answered is the income. I mean, I knew it
Hmm.
was helping somebody. I mean, I guess I'm employed to do this thing, and I guess my boss likes me, but like I had
Yeah.
the hardest time figuring out like what actually happens at the end of this. And I think that's a really beautiful
Hmm.
thing, Tim, and where you were versus where you are now. Of you are now not only seeing lives changed by your own work, and you can directly go home and say, my reward for today's risk is insert family names that forever will be changed. But now you're at the point where you're leading other people where you're just like, I don't even know that family's name, but they're impacted. And so your reward is almost, you
Sure.
have this compounding reward multiple. Where your reward is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger because you chose to not just do the risky thing, but now lead others through the risky thing. And so you're just living
Hmm.
this life of impact multiplication, which I think is amazing. So let's go to the how. You've got a lot of feedback, but what? One of the things that I have admired about you is it seems like I don't know, you seem to understand why people struggle with this idea of risk and reward. Like, why do people struggle? I think we got to say that before we say, okay, so practically, how do we go about this? What coaching would you give?
You know, it's I would put it in two categories. The first, I go to the young person, and I'll give my experience, and then just I see young people struggle with this every day in the
Yeah.
career, prior to the
Yeah.
career, thinking about the career. The number one is actually it's actually not the risk of it's typically not the risk of not making any money or anything. That's obviously there.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it's actually the risk of what other people think. It's the
Come on.
risk of what other people's opinion of, are you doing something like this? It's what other people's expectations on your life of what they think you should be doing. And so, and I never want to minimize that for a young person. That is so visceral. And I can remember having my own. It was like, oh my gosh, like what if this person doesn't like this? And you get on the, 5 years, a decade later, and you think about some of the people's opinions that you were so nervous about, and sometimes
Yeah.
you don't even talk to them anymore, and they
Yep.
literally don't matter. So it has to
But
go
you don't
back
know
to,
that at
man,
the time, right? It's like
you
you
don't
think
know
that
that at
this
the
is going to
time.
matter so much, and you're going to, all of it's going to be the same. And then you're right. Years go on, and the very people that you cared the most about, you don't even say a word to anymore. It is
You
crazy. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, no, no. Yeah, you have all this perception of what other people think, and the older you get, the more you realize that none of that matters. This is a kind of a this could be a polarizing quote, but people care about you to the degree it affects them, and
Mm,
people care about you to the degree that it affects them.
yeah.
And the more that you go through life outside of your core group of people, it just becomes so real and true. And so it allows you to really go back to your core values and who do you want to be, and live authentically in that. So I think that's a main reason people don't do things. I just call it approval of man. The second is some version of what you could call opportunity costs, like what I went through of saying no to a
Yeah.
salary
The
to
merit,
saying
the
yes to,
merits. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that saying yes to this. That those are the main two I observe young people. What's really interesting that doesn't get talked about as much is for someone that has experienced some success, and I'd say even maybe more potently entrepreneurial success, is
Yeah.
it's almost as though you have this view, okay, when I reach this level of success, it's going to be so much easier to keep going. It
Right.
actually becomes harder and harder,
Come on.
because what you say yes to, the more responsibilities you have, typically if you're a leader, the larger the giants are you're slaying, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the what you have to give up to do and go into that is more. And it's always easier to just stay in the comfort zone. And so, especially because you think for the perspective of a 22-year-old coming out of college that actually doesn't have anything to lose,
Yeah.
versus a 32-year-old that has, marriage, kids, they have a great, income, whatever it is. It becomes harder and harder as you go. And so those
Yes.
are for young people, approval man, opportunity cost, and for someone older, I've observed it's more what you have to say no to as you
Yeah.
keep rising when it comes to risks.
Yeah. Yeah, you're mentioning, every year I try to read. You mentioned Tim Keller before, but Tim Keller has that book, Counterfeit Gods. And he talks
Great
about
book.
how there are these idols, right, that seem to be the ones that we are serving more than anything. And you mentioned a few of them. Two of those are approval and comfort. And I think a takeaway I'm having from this time with you today, Tim, is if you are saying this seems risky, and then you mention what that risk is, and it falls into either I'm scared of what people will think of me on it, or I just want to be comfortable and not push myself, then you're probably never going to achieve any sort of reward you could have in your life, right? And it's
Hmm.
probably to your point, if it's either one of those things, then it is probably more of a selfish, like I'm trying to protect self. Being comfortable is a protection of
Hmm.
self. Everyone needs to see something from me. I don't want to fail because what will they think of me? And the breakthrough is I'm doing it for someone else. So even if I do fail, who cares? I'm supposed to
Hmm.
work hard because I'm doing it for someone else. I'm doing it for this reason. That reward is bigger than me. Therefore, these idols that plague me maybe go by the wayside. So I think that's so good. So maybe to close here, if you could give then, if that's kind of the why people are there, if you could just give some practical how to. Like, how in your life today are you making decisions that are risk versus reward? This tension that exists, that frankly, I'm sure you're making multiple decisions every day based on
Hmm.
just the framework of risk versus reward. Tell the listeners, what could we learn? What's some practical tips?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a concept I heard from a mentor, but just reasonable probability. So, oftentimes, when you are faced with a bigger picture decision, a bigger picture life decision that's more risky, it, it's weightier. It feels much more impactful, right? Like me, you probably didn't think through very long what you were going to eat for lunch today. It's not like something that you were probably stirring about, but the first time you have to decide, okay, where am I going to go work? That's a bigger picture decision. And I've observed with bigger picture decisions, there's this almost expectation that you got to have this like writing in the sky of like, hey, this is exactly what you should want to do
Right,
or you should
right.
do. And I actually don't believe that's how we were meant to ever live. We were meant to, have people around us and be people that seek wisdom and make decisions without all the answers and step out into faith. That is the what we are asked to do as human beings all the time, is step out into
Yeah.
faith with the best information we have. And so I ask a question when I'm processing this with someone, just making a bigger decision, that how do you know when to make it, even though you're not 100% there? I'll just ask the question, hey, when do you think I was 100% to marry my wife?
Mm,
And sometimes it's kind of funny, the response, depending on who I'm talking to, they'll say, the day you met her. I'm like that. No. Sadly, no, that's
yeah.
not
Have you
Hollywood.
dated? Have you
Um,
dated before?
have you dated before? Not the day I met, not after a few dates. It was a while.
Right.
But it's kind of funny. When was I 100% to marry my wife? Well, uh, when you think in terms of what if, like, I don't know, I
Yeah.
was 23 when I decided to propose. I was 24 when I got married. When I was 23 and I was making the decision, there was a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know who we were going to
Yep.
be in 5 years. I didn't know what was going to happen the next year. I didn't know a lot of things, but what I did know is I knew
Mm,
Steph. I knew how much I loved her. I knew what her faith was about. I knew what she cared about. I knew what we wanted to build. And I was maybe 70% of, yeah, I want to marry this woman. Just by making the decision, I was 75. And
yeah.
then I bought the ring and I was 80. And then I asked her parents and I was 85. And then I
Mm,
proposed, I was 95. And then every little decision along the way, to where I'm looking her down the aisle, she's walking, I say I do, she says I do. It's not even in the question. I'm 100%.
right.
And so that's just a go thinking about that story. It's You don't have to be 100% to make the next step. Simply by making the next step, you actually build more confidence in that this is where you were supposed to be. So
So
where
good.
is that for me? Reasonable probability. If you want to do let your yes be yes and your no's be no's, you got to find that percentage of how can you step forward in confidence. I was 70% to get married,
Yeah.
and everything along the way. led to 100%. So that would be my most practical piece of advice as you're evaluating
Mm,
conversations is thinking of it in terms as, man, to the best of your knowledge, don't think about what if. Think about what do you know, and then take the next step. The second piece of advice I'd give is um, just sticking on the what if for a second.
right.
Oftentimes we think of what if, what if, what if, what if. You said this, the negative hypotheticals. All that leads to is fear and anxiety. A much more fruitful question is even if. And if you can solve the three even
Ooh,
if,
look at this. The little trade out of
uh,
the what to even. Okay, I got you.
if you could solve the even ifs, there's a lot of confidence you could build, and there's three even ifs in particular to a lot of things, but I just say for this role, or this type of something entrepreneurial, uh, even if it's harder than you think or it's not exactly what you think, there
Yeah,
will be short-term fruit for the inputs you do, like that you will
yeah,
sustain, even if. The second even if is even if it's harder or it takes longer than you anticipated, you will open doors that you don't realize are possible. For me, I had no clue that starting in Dallas would lead to launching an Arkansas office, would lead to launching a Kansas City office through someone else. Had no clue that
right.
that was even possible. Those doors opened because it took the first step back in Dallas. But the number one even if is, hey, even if this is not what I think, it's harder than I think, it takes longer than I anticipated, if who I'm becoming is better through what I'm stepping into, that of in
Yeah.
itself is worth it. And so those two things is the reasonable probability and reframing all of your challenge in your mind from what if to even if would be the advice I have for people.
Tim, that is incredible. Being and able to be close to you is a gift. I have watched you over the years mature. Everything you are saying, you put into action personally and professionally. And so I want to thank you for being on the show because
Thanks for having me,
this
Travis.
was amazing. And listeners out there, as you are going through this idea of risk versus reward, know that just like us and just like you heard today, it's attention. Tensions do not have
Mhm.
clear answers. Tensions do not have the ability for us to say black and white, right or wrong. And that's what we're doing on this podcast is talking about those things, saying that we're all human, we're all going through it, and just giving practical pieces of advice of how we're trying to manage these tensions in which we're all living in as human beings. Until next time, thanks.